Hello, everyone, and my name is Tasnim, and I am one of ALFIE's trustees. I believe I've met many of you, which is really, really exciting. It's just been a wonderful journey being, supporting ALFIE and ALFIE as well. So tomorrow marks the start of Disability History Month, and many of you may know that the theme is disability, childhood, and youth. And ALFIE has been the type of organization which has truly centered young people in its work. So there's two examples that come to mind for me. And first is the Our Voice project, which I was involved in a few years ago. I've now aged, so I don't fit into the age bracket. But being a part of that, it was a project that really aims to amplify young people's voices and address the erasure of young people's education experience. And it really centers young people's experiences, including when we talked about isolation as well. I've really enjoyed loved being able to connect with other young people. I think I've got to meet you that way, Melody. And it's been a space to really learn and think much more deeply about disability activism. And also, as a young trustee, I think that in itself highlights how Alfie is keen to represent the interest and viewpoint of the younger generation, and that contributes to the long-term planning and investing in young people. And it's also been a place that fosters mentorship like relationships. By really having that intergenerational focus, we're able to create a space where we can really support each other and help each other to go. So to keep this conversation going in today's AGM, we're incredibly privileged to be joined by three incredible individuals who play such a key role in centering young people's voices and experience. So first we have Melody Powell. So Melody, if it's all right with you, we'll jump on to the first question, which is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you enjoy about being a young activist?
Hi, I'm Melody. I do diversity and inclusion consultancy and have been involved with Alfie for about 3 years. I've been a part of the Our Voice project since it started. I enjoy making a difference. I just enjoy actually having a say in, how we progress as a movement as a whole, and kind of not having people decide things for me, and actually having a part in that and seeing the actions that are taken from that.
Excellent. Thank you, Melody. We're also joined by Lucy Wing. Lucy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you enjoy about being a young activist?
My name is Lucy. I'm a member of Our Voice, Alfie's Youth Project. I'm also a criminology and psychology student, although just psychology right now. And I am part of Waltham Forest Council's Violence Against Women and Girls team. And for me, I love being involved in activism because it's equal parts selfish and selfless, because it's healing for me, and obviously creating things to help disabled people benefits me as a disabled person. But also, who doesn't like helping other people? I think that's what we all want. We all want to have someone be someone that we didn't have when we were younger.
I absolutely loved what you said about the healing side of it, but definitely see. And finally, we have Mark. Mark, you may not be a young activist, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what do you enjoy from working in youth activism?
I'm a not so young activist, I guess. I've been part of the disabled people's movement since the mid 90s, and I got involved through another disabled activist who said to me, "Come on, Mark, you know, you're clearly disabled. Why don't you just admit it and get on board with us?" And of course, I've been disabled since I was about 10 years old. I acquired a disability through my youth, but had struggled in a non-disabled world and not really admitted it. So it took a conscious disabled activist to say, "Come on," and I thank Jackie very much because it changed my life in that sense. So that's really important. to me. I've been involved in local disabled people's organisations as trustee, as members, and in the national body, which was originally British Council of Disabled People, and then the United Kingdom Disabled People's Council, and more recently Reclaiming Our Futures Alliance, and I'm on the steering group of that with Michelle. Michelle and I are both part of the international committee, and it's always been a principle of the international committee to bring young people into that group so that we can learn from them and they can push the movement forward, not just in the UK but internationally.
Thank you ever so much to the three of you. We're going to be diving into much deeper conversations, but it's just really great to get to know each and every one of you. So this is a question for all of you. Melody, we'll start with you, then Mark, and then Lucy. So the question is, how did you get involved in the disabled movement? And can you tell us a little bit about the things that you have done or that / you are doing now? So Melody, do you want to go first?
I got involved in sort of activism and stuff through kind of stumbling upon ALLFIE through my uni work. They used a snippet from Lucy Mason talking about her experience with assistants at school. So I popped along to an ALLFIE AGM and went, this is amazing. People actually campaigning for, making inclusion better at school. I'd never even thought that people cared about that. And seeing that other young people were involved in that was just inspiring to me. And I've kind of wanted to be a part of it ever since. And I enjoy just making a difference. Like that I don't know. I guess as Lucy said earlier, it's healing.
Definitely that. I know when I first got involved in any kind of activism, it was seeing other disabled students also doing it. And for me, it's just being able to see that community of people also just as passionate about these sort of things, which was just absolutely incredible. Mark, how did you get involved with the disabled people's movement? And can you tell us a bit about some of the things that you have, that you are doing?
I mentioned about Jackie getting me involved, but Jackie and I were involved in international work with disabled people through, I was working at the time at De Montfort University in Leicester at a thing called the Centre for Social Action. And we were doing projects internationally, mainly in the former Soviet Union. So that was Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and parts of Eastern Europe, in Bulgaria and Romania. And central to all of that work was the institutionalization of childcare, trying to stop children, particularly disabled children, going into children's homes and trying to liberate children out of institutions by creating family-based care in the community, either to return children back to their birth families or to create alternative family care like fostering and domestic adoption. So I got involved in that way, and then I moved to the University of East Anglia and I ran a global disability research program called the Disability Knowledge and Research Program on behalf of the British Department for International Development. And that was a global research program that we engaged disabled researchers from the global south, from South Africa, Southern Africa rather, Latin America, Asia. And we commissioned them to run research projects involving disabled people in their countries. And then we published them and disseminated them. We tried to model a way of having what we called an emancipatory research paradigm. That was Mike Oliver's contribution to thinking about how you can apply the social model to research. And I would encourage anybody else to read that. Mike Oliver's stuff is on the free to access on the University of Leeds website. So we did that, and that I'm very proud of that. The other thing, as a disabled activist, I'm also a member of Disabled People Against Health. and particularly, well, since 2010, Disabled People Against Cuts have been fighting austerity, first from the coalition government and then from the successive Tory government. We've been doing direct action, protests, and all sorts of other things to draw attention to the grave and systematic violations that the government has imposed on disabled people. And as part of that, we've been presenting to the United Nations Disability around the convention. And we've done 2 shadow reports and been to Geneva 3 times now to expose what the British government is doing to disabled people. That's generally about what I've been involved in.
Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing that. It's really interesting being able to hear about the international aspect side of it as well. Lucy, how did you get involved in the disabled people's movement, and can you tell us about some of the things that you've done?
I became involved because I met Michelle at a Million Women Rise march. So I was already involved in women's rights spaces. I'd never really seen another disabled person be kind of front and center, and seeing her up on stage and taking up space was really quite, I don't know, it's something like changed. I was like, yeah, I like her. And then what I've been involved in is really just mainly stuff with ALLFIE, which Mark is also a part of, the campaigning, and interviewing disabled scholar Myra Griffith, can't pronounce it. And yeah, we did a project with UCO as well. Yeah, that's what I've been involved in and how I got involved in it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lucy. And this is another question for each of you. Mark, we'll start with you this time. Please, can you tell us about some of the social justice activism that you're involved in, and why is it important for young disabled people to get involved in these spaces?
I mean, I take a lot of my inspiration now from what ALLFIE's doing in terms of your campaigning, your commitment to being youth-led in whole numbers of areas, and particularly how young disabled people have reshaped and built on the social model, particularly around diversity and intersectionality. And I think that's really enriched and rejuvenated the movement. So I'm very proud that from the mid-90s onwards, I've been involved in young disabled people's forums in various different places. Originally with the Greater Manchester Coalition of Disabled People, their youth forum, which was a great experience. And they ran a peer support project funded by Joseph Rowntree Foundation. And I was lucky enough to get involved and support the workers and the researchers, who were all young disabled people. And we produced a publication out of that. So that when I went to work for Norfolk Coalition of Disabled People after I left the university, I was determined to set up a young disabled people's forum there based on the model of Greater Manchester. And that was really exciting. And that was a very powerful group, but also taught me a lot. Young disabled people are essential for the movement to grow, develop, change with the times. And and I've learned huge amounts from all the young disabled people I've worked with along the way. But also, I hope that some of it's that intergenerational thing somebody talked about earlier. We all learn from each other, and I think that's really important.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. And Melody, would you please be able to tell us something about some of the social justice activism that you're involved in, and why it is important for young disabled people to be involved in these spaces?
Yeah, I'm also involved with a group called Para Pride, which focuses on the LGBTQ plus disabled community and how there are rarely any queer spaces that are accessible. Even if you think about simple things such as going to a gay bar, they're never accessible because they're always downstairs or, just out the way. And obviously, it's important to embrace every part of your identity. You're not just half a person. And I've been involved a lot in that. And also on some personal projects, I've been campaigning for sort of inclusive flying, of how if you're physically disabled, you are required to have a PA with you, whether you can manage on your own or not. So you're forced to pay more, and things like that. And I think that's important to, I guess, remember that we are people. We're not just a disability. And, we want to make sure that the world treats us as a person. And I think it's very important that young people remember they have a voice and you can use it. Even if people don't like you using it, you should. You should make people uncomfortable because then they might listen. And I like the fact that ALLFIE encourages that. ALLFIE isn't afraid to make people uncomfortable and get young people involved.
Excellent, thank you. And Lucy, the same question to you.
I'm involved in women's rights movement, and I think that cross movement, being involved in multiple movements, is so important because we don't solely exist as the one thing that we're currently talking about. At all times, we are, say we go to a queer space like Melody was talking about, you are still a disabled person as well as a queer person. And kind of jumping off of queer people, there are more LGBTQ plus people, especially trans people, who identify as disabled. And then me being involved in violence against women and girls, and general misogyny, there are higher rates of things like abuse amongst disabled women. They tend to have to endure this violence for longer than non-disabled women before they're given help. There's so much racism, and especially an intersection of racism and misogyny within healthcare systems. So talking about any of these things, they don't exist on their own, and any other identity just adds to your experience as a disabled person, and I don't think it is appropriate to completely separate them out.
Thank you so much, Lucy. And I think just from the three responses that you had, it's just hearing about the importance of intersectionality at the heart of everything, but also being able to almost basically learn across projects that we may have been involved in, over spaces that we've been involved in, cross movements, and how that basically all comes together. And I think just hearing from your experiences, it's almost like there's so much strength in being able to bring what we learn from one space to the other in order to support each other. And I think what you really touched upon, Lucy, was kind of recognizing the sort of challenges that come with it. So I guess my question to you, Lucy, and then Melody, I'll ask you the same afterwards, is what keeps you involved in the disabled people's movement and activism?
So I wrote down that there were two major points. One thing is knowing that we can change things, because we have seen change in the past. So why can there not be more change in the future? But those things don't happen on our own. So we need to be part of collective activism to make change. So any of us leaving, for whatever reason that is, as long as you're making a choice to leave, you are choosing to leave the thing that can be the most powerful to get change. But also, I love being involved, and I want to be involved in the disabled people's movement because I know how seeing other people has affected me. Like I spoke about Michelle, and that moment of seeing her at Million Women Rise was really quite big for me. But also my last tutor was a criminologist who specializes in disability hate crime, David Wilkin. When I've kind of had an interaction with those people, it's really felt right. I felt seen. I felt like there's somebody there for me, even if they don't know that they're there for me. they're there for disabled people as a whole. And knowing that I could even be the tiniest bit like that for someone, who doesn't want that, It's that thing of being selfish and selfless about helping other people, but also it makes you feel really good.
Excellent, Lucy. Thank you so much. And Melody, what keeps you involved in the disabled people's movement and activism?
Yeah, I agree with Lucy's point of just being that person that you wanted when you were younger, because I know for me growing up, there wasn't really anyone to look up to who was disabled, and fighting for what we want, because they were all not mainstream, because nobody wanted to show that movement. And it's since joining the disabled people's movement, it's like, oh my God, all this stuff was going on and nobody was telling young disabled people what was happening. And yeah, I want to be part of making sure other young disabled people know what's going on and can be a part of it and actually see the change themselves. Because yeah, it kind of makes me sad that all of this stuff was going on for my rights that I had no idea about because nobody was talking about it. But yeah, I guess that keeps me involved, just knowing that I might be able to have a slight impact on making sure the disabled people's movement continues to carry on.
Definitely that, and I can personally relate to the fact that even though you may have experienced disabling barriers yourself, if there's anything you can do to make it better for others around you who are in a similar situation, that was honestly one of my biggest drivers as well. And I think it was almost like when I first came across the social model of disability, which focuses on the fact that society disables you more, and I think it will that view on life and the way that we view things, it honestly changed the way I saw it. I think growing up, you can internalize it and think that you're the problem, but that will shift in the way we think about the world and how we view it was so important to me. And the more people know that, the more we can challenge these barriers as well. Mark, what do you do in your capacity as a disability activist to support young to support youth participation within the disabled people's movement?
Well, I've talked a bit about what I did in terms of working with various disabled people's organisations around the country and internationally. I suppose the most recent thing is the end torture of disabled children and young people in institutions. And when the scandal hit last January, I got really angry about it. I know Michelle did, and various other people in the movement, and we decided to do something about it. And so we've been coordinating meetings, and we're having a day of action in December and a meeting in Parliament. And it's really important that young disabled people are at the forefront of that struggle. And I suppose, I think it's really offensive that the successive governments since 2010 are trying to turn the clock back on our rights, and particularly on inclusive education. The funding of so-called special schools and special residential schools is turning the clock back in a horrible, nasty, vindictive way. So I feel very passionately about that. The other thing I've done is I've actually written up my experiences of working with young disabled people in a new book that's just out. It's called Labels Are for Jars, Not People, Emancipatory Approaches to Working with Young Disabled People. And I've tried to capture all of the knowledge and experience of the movement in terms of the social model of disability, human rights, inclusion, diversity, intersectionality, and put that into a book that's very practical. So it's got exercises and games and things that I've done with young disabled people to help them realise their rights, not just get their voice, but also find their agency as well, to not just shout about their world, but also to change the world. So it's also about social action. So that's really exciting. That's out now. So that's something on a very practical level. And I hope that's a useful resource that will encourage organisations, to disabled people's organisations, to set up youth forums and get the resources and the funding to bring the next generation of young activists through, to replace old people like me as we move into retirement. So that's my hope, but I'm not going anywhere yet. So I also intend to be around for a bit longer. So support that development and hold the older ones to account to make sure that they do what they say they're supposed to do.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mark. I know there's a lot in that, and I've had a quick read as well, and there's so much in there. And being able to put it into practice is a whole challenge in itself, but being able to make it so it's more digestible and we can really make sense of it and how we can actually do it in real life is so, so important. I think we hear about these words kind of just thrown around, but how we go about doing it practically is so important. And I have a lot of faith in in your book being able to get that message across. So this is a question for everyone, and we'll go in the order of Lucy, Mark, and Melody. What do we need to do to ensure that youth participation of disabled people within the disabled movement is long term?
Again, it's another 2 points for me. The first point is realizing that we are people outside of disabled people's movement, so we have things going on, and that applies to everyone really. We can't always meet 9 to 5 at our town hall, and being able to meet online I think is really important, because I don't know where any of you are from, but we're all together, you know, and we wouldn't have that if we weren't able to meet online. But also I think that centering education is really important to keeping young disabled people involved, but also helping them to realize that what they experienced is discrimination. These are barriers, because I think for a lot of us, especially for me, when you go to school, that is the first time that you are away from your family. That's the first time that you are out of your community. That is the first time that I ever felt othered. That's the first time that I was ever put in a separate room because for some reason I was decided to be different. So I think that is, for a lot of us, where it all begins, when we start noticing how other people treat us as disabled people. So what ALLFIE does with centering education, I think, is really important, if that makes sense.
Lucy, you said that so well, and I absolutely loved every point that you mentioned. I think I saw a couple of hearts and reactions as well to what you were saying too. Mark, over to you. What do you think we can do to make sure that this is long term?
Well, I suppose I'd just like to emphasise that, put it the other way around in that sense. If we don't do it, our movement will die. We have to keep revitalising and bringing new and youth into the movement. Otherwise, it just gets older and dies and becomes staid and out of touch. So that's why, you know, in what I do, I always insist that the organisations I'm involved in reflect the diversity of the community we serve. And that means, you know, across race, gender, sexuality, religion, ethnicity, and age. And young people can't do it by themselves, just as disabled people, we can't do it by ourselves. But together we can be much stronger. You know, individually we're relatively powerless. But if we join together and reflect the diversity of our community and our population and our movement, then we're much more powerful. And we've had some great examples of that. I think ALLFIE is probably a shining example to the rest of the disability movement in terms of that intergenerational, intersectional representation. I would say that these are really tough times. It's hard for disabled people's organisations. You know, we've had continuing austerity for 13 years, and it's carrying on with no end in sight, really. And that means lots of disabled people's organisations have either shrunk enormously because they've lost their funding, or they've closed. So there's large areas of the country that don't have any organisation. And you can count on one hand the number of young disabled people's forums or youth groups of young disabled people who are working to the social model of disability and fighting for rights and voice and agency. So these are really tough times, and I don't underestimate that. So I think we need to educate funders and politicians and hold their feet to the fire, because they did sign the UN Convention on the Rights of Disabled People, and they've never enacted it. They've never resourced disabled people's voice and representation. And that applies to every political party, not just the Conservatives. So I think we've got a big job to do. So we need to keep renewing our movement.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mark. And Melody, over to you. What do you think we need to do to ensure that youth participation of disabled people within the disabled movement is long term?
Yeah, I agree with Lucy on the education area is important because that's where young people are. But also getting involved with sort of the hospitals and the other things that young disabled people are often accessing. Because I know personally, I was branded as a brat by many hospital staff because I actually stood up for myself. I didn't like being talked down to, and I have a lot of trauma from that. But if there was more disabled people's movement involved with the young people at my hospital, I would have felt that, oh, actually, I can stand up for myself, and that's okay. And other people are standing up for themselves as well. And I think that's the key, is meeting young disabled people where they are and kind of encouraging them to believe in themselves and actually advocate for themselves, so that they don't give up. Because I think that's the thing. Every young person is always so passionate about being seen and being treated right, but they kind of get pushed down by society. So making sure that they're adopted into the disabled people's movement to carry on the fight is crucial, really.
Definitely. I know that from my frustrations that I've had as in basically my sort of young adulthood phase, that there are times where you come across these sort of barriers, and because it's so isolating, you don't know who to connect to. But the more and more I've got to connect with other people who are in similar situations, also experiencing similar things. It's so basically like we're working, there's other people who experience it, and we can work in solidarity with each other, knowing that the fight is hard, but we've got each other's back in it. We know where we're coming from. We respect each other. We value each other, and together we can make this. The fight is it's a big one, but together, by working as a collective, it plays such a big part in being able to keep that sustainable. We're now on to the last sort of main question for the panel. We'll go in the order of Mark, Lucy, and then Melody. What is the one thing that you would like the audience to take away from our conversation today?
I think that the point is that I made before, that if we don't involve young disabled people in our movement will die.
Excellent. Thank you. Lucy, over to you.
In the way that we are young disabled people, but we are also disabled people, and that putting us strictly in the box of young disabled person doesn't help us, and it doesn't help the rest of the community.
Thank you, Lucy. And Melody, over to you.
I would say that it's important to meet young disabled people where they are and respect whatever way they communicate to you, whether that appears to be a way that's, I don't know, you as an adult deem as immature or inappropriate. That is them expressing their rights and what they believe in. And I think that's the most important thing.
Thank you ever so much. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing from each and every one of you. I love in the way that many of the messages actually overlap with one another, and it's just been really, really great to hear it.